Previously, I had been somebody that was like, oh, CrossFit's so dumb, I'm never doing that. At the time, I tied a lot of my worth to my physical appearance. And being able to change that allowed me at least to become more confident in myself. And through that confidence, I learned to be confident in my body for what it's capable of instead of what it looks like.
Kind of having that mantra to like know, like, you want something so bad that you're willing to push yourself to get there. Well, then it's like, the whole David Goggins thing, like mental callousing. Like, I don't care what you physically put me through. Like, mentally, I'm willing to go there. I'm going to keep going there. And so in training, you just have to put yourself in uncomfortable positions all the time.
Ellia and Joe, welcome to the Jedburgh podcast.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks. So I think we picked the hottest place here on day, 3 for some, day 1 for others of CrossFit Games 2023. But I just figured this is a great conversation to talk about be all you can be. And when I saw the back of the truck on Fit 1 here, I was like, I have to do it.
I thought you just wanted a sauna session.
I do also want a sauna session because we didn't get a chance to work out yet today. So I figured we would warm it up.
I mean, a little jump rope, but...
Little jump, but that was in the shade.
That's true.
So now we're going to sweat it out here. And then I think we're riding bikes, but I don't want to tell them too much about that yet.
Yeah, that's okay.
Just testing our grit.
No.
That's right. We're going to test your grit. So I know you two have been through more before, but let's talk about the CrossFit Games.
All right.
And we're going to talk about what brings you to the CrossFit Games. We're going to talk about Warrior Fitness Team and the very interesting different paths that you've each taken. So somebody asked me the question a little while ago, well, why do you want to have them both at the same time? And I thought, because when we talk about be all you can be, and we talk about an event like CrossFit Games, CrossFit in general, and the focus of building leaders, we're talking about taking people who, number one, need to invest in themselves. And it doesn't always matter if they're the best and they're the number one in the world, because it starts with identifying our own vision, our own goals, and then putting a plan in place to achieve that. You've both, Joe, now you're on the Warrior Fitness Team. Ellia, you've been on the Warrior Fitness Team, but you came and served very differently in the military and have also now gone off to do some pretty cool things, Joe, while you still serve. So your paths are parallel and collide, but also are very different. And when we talk about doing things that motivate us, and the Army being a place where you can follow your dreams and your passion, whatever they may be, this was the great backdrop, despite all the metal that is quite hot. So let's get into it. Ellia, I want to talk to you first about why get into CrossFit in the first place. And I'm not only that, but we're going to talk about neuroscience and we're going to talk about your whole career. But you went to UC Davis, you studied pre-med, and you had this kind of thought that, well, maybe I don't want to be a doctor.
Yeah, so I was pre-med in undergrad, thought I was going to, go on to be med school. My original plan was to be a neurosurgeon in the Army. I was in ROTC while I was in college, and graduated, commissioned into the California Army National Guard, and I was going to apply to med school, go be a doctor. About 10 months after graduation, hadn't really done any sort of physical activity since graduation, when the Army stopped making me do PT for ROTC.
Were you an athlete before?
I was a dancer and a gymnast growing up.
Oh, wow.
I quit gymnastics, I think, when I was in middle school, and I quit dance when I was in high school. So the only physical activity I did in college was the PT that ROTC forced me to do. Absolutely hated it. And then, sat around eating a lot of Taco Bell, realized I was going to have to pass a PT test soon. So that was where I first got into, it wasn't quite CrossFit at that point. It was more strength training. I started doing some powerlifting and Olympic lifting with a little bit of maybe some burpees and assault bike here and there, just so I could pass a PT test.
Now is when we have just the 3 event PT test now.
Yeah,
now it's changed.
Yeah, that was the easy PT test. Yeah. But it was enough that I could pass my PT test, and that's what I was concerned with at that point. Post-graduation, I took out a small loan to apply to med school because that is a very expensive endeavor. I applied to over 40 schools, didn't get an interview anywhere. But through the process of having to answer 40 plus times, why do you want to be a doctor, started to realize I didn't actually want to be a doctor. It was just kind of something that had been put into my head at an early age. When you're growing up, what do you want to be when you grow up? You got doctor, lawyer, president, astronaut, and that's kind of it. And I didn't know what else was out there, so doctor would just made sense to me at the time. But once I realized through that application process and having to answer, why do you want to be a doctor? I was like, well, I don't think I want to be a doctor. So it was kind of a blessing in disguise that I didn't get into med school. Shifted focus then to grad school. I was working in a research lab at the time, doing molecular neurobiology, and decided to apply to grad school and ended up getting accepted to a PhD program in neuroscience.
Wow.
So I don't know how far you want me to go with this.
No, that's great. And Joe, what about you?
Yeah, getting into CrossFit. So I graduated from West Point in 2016. So played rugby there. Before that, I played football back in high school. So always had a good strength base, good power base from all those sports. But we're in the Army, and one of the seniors when I was a freshman told me, who cares how much you can bench press if you can't patch your 2 mile. And I was not in good, aerobic shape back then. So along the way, fast forward, decided I wanted to go to SF selection, and I needed to find a good gym to start working out. At the time, I was in Huntsville, Alabama, and the only good gym I could find was CrossFit Impulse, which, obviously a CrossFit gym. And the first workout that they had in there was, they called it a front squat party. And it was just essentially...
Sounds awful.
It was like an EMOM and just build up to a 1 rep max front squat, and I was hooked immediately. I was like, man, I can do this. This CrossFit stuff's not too bad. And of course, I'd watched all the, the documentaries and everything, and kind of like how a lot of people, everyone aspires to be rich for running one day. So, that got me hooked, and, haven't looked back since. Been doing CrossFit since about 2019, I suppose now.
Yeah. You guys served very differently, too. So, you served in the National Guard. Mm-hmm. And Joe, you serve active duty right now. Talk for a minute about the experience there, and also you went to an infantry unit.
Yes.
And were challenged very early on when you first got there at your first PT test. You talked about it, but you didn't talk about the experience that you had on that first one. But talk about walking into an infantry unit. And we've had this conversation a couple of times. We've had on Shaylin Laurie earlier. We had on Ava George, who's on the team right now, where both, Shaylin, an infantry officer, and Ava, an 11 Bravo enlisted infantryman, but they're women.
Yeah.
In an organization that's historically been men.
Yep.
You went there as a doctor.
As
medical services
medical service,
officer.
Yeah.
We call them doc. It doesn't matter if you're doctor or not.
I had, right after I commissioned, I had spent about a year in an aviation brigade, and then I was being transferred into an infantry battalion in the California Army National Guard. It was right around the time that they started allowing women into those types of units, and I was actually the only female at the time in that infantry battalion. My very first drill, the day before, I ended up in the hospital.
Oh gosh.
It must have been food poisoning or something like that, some sort of stomach bug. Came and went very quickly, but I ended up in the ER with an IV. And I was supposed to go to drill the next morning, and it was my first drill with the infantry battalion, and we had a PT test.
Oh, geez.
And I'm sitting in this emergency room with an IV in my arm, and I'm like, crap. If I don't show up for my very first drill and it's a PT test, it won't matter that I was in the hospital. They're going to think that I'm a shitbag. If I'm the female trying to get out of the PT test, I need to take this PT test. So I'm, texting with my commander. I'm like, hey, sir, just wanted to let you know I'm in the emergency room right now. I think it was just a stomach bug. I'm still going to try to make it to drill tomorrow morning. I'll keep you updated. So I ended up making it to drill. I showed up, took the PT test, I got the highest score in the unit. Almost shit my pants a little bit on the run.
Whatever it takes.
Yeah, we've also all been
takes.
there.
What do you get tested on in this PT test?
So at the time, it was the previous version of the PT test. It was 2 minutes of push-ups, 2 minutes of sit-ups, and a 2-mile run.
So you beat all the guys
So
in those tests?
This was, I'm not sure where they're at with the ACFT at this point, whether it's gender neutral or not, but the previous PT test had separate standards for male and female.
Mm-hmm.
So like for a female to get a passing score, I think it was like 20 push-ups in 2 minutes versus the guys had to do like 42 or 43.
42 sounds right, yeah.
And then for the sit-ups, it may have been more similar for the sit-ups. And then the 2-mile run times were very different in terms of what would be a passing score or like a maxing score. So it wasn't that I necessarily did, although I think I did more sit-up reps than all the guys.
Nice.
But like my overall score was higher than everybody else.
Wow. Okay, so it's scored basically out of...
It was 100 points per event. In order to pass, you needed to get 60 points in each event, and to max the PT test would be 100 points in each event. So a total of 300 points, 180 was passing, and I'm pretty sure I got a 300, or
Nice.
very close to
Wow.
it, something like that.
That's so cool. Do you feel like there's almost an adrenaline spike when you have to go into a competition like that after something so horrible?
I think the adrenaline spike came more from going into an infantry unit as a female and feeling
Yeah.
like I needed to prove myself. And so going back to the idea of it being, a very male-dominated profession, especially in the combat arms, for some reason in the military, we tie all of our worth to our physical fitness level.
I've been there.
It's true. That's true. It's like
And-
that and the badges that you wear. The first thing
Yeah.
you look at when you see somebody.
You don't even have to be good at your job. If you're just fit, everyone assumes you are. So.
Exactly. And so it was like I knew going in it was going to be a very simple way to gain the respect of my soldiers. And so it was kind of this like, I need to go and show them that I am capable of keeping up with the boys.
Yeah.
So that I won't be, oh, we've got a female in the unit now and everybody's upset about it or whatever. So it was, I think that was more where the adrenaline spike came from that really got me through that test.
I mean, there's so much pressure in that, not just like for yourself, but everyone's looking at, can women do this? And
Yeah, absolutely.
knowing that.
And it's one of those things where it's like, I don't want to be the female that sets the bad example. And
Yeah.
I feel like every female feels that makes them think that females don't belong here.
Yeah.
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 There's an interesting dynamic too that you bring up here is control the uncontrollables. People talk about that. I think people say it all the time, probably too much, but fitness is one of those things that we can control.
Yeah.
And when we talk about preparation, the tagline of the podcast is how you prepare today determines success tomorrow. A lot of times that comes down to preparation. Joe and I were talking earlier about getting ready for something like selection for special forces, or Jessie and I have talked about her training for her competitions. And when you can take away an aspect of physical pain and push off how long it's going to be before you start to feel that, then you are buying yourself more time to tackle the mental challenges, tackle the emotional challenges, right? Because you're going to need that bandwidth to think about. But when your body hurts, right, all of a sudden that's where your mind goes and that's where your emotions go. And the longer we can push that out, the higher likelihood of success that we can have.
I think you can also build a tolerance to or just a comfortability in that place of pain. Just teach your mind and body that this is normal, we function here, stay focused, and having that ability to put your focus away from the pain onto the task.
Absolutely. I mean, you've got to live in that world, and the more we live in that world, the more we become accustomed to it, and then go seek it out. Joe, you sought out special operations. You and I talked a little bit ago about your decision to go there, but then also having to dedicate time for training to go to selection. A lot of times we build great teams through shared suffering. Or an event like Special Forces Selection has an entire week dedicated to shared suffering after the week of individual suffering. Talk about training for something like that, and when that, because that training piece is going to be on your own, and then having to perform at an individual level, but then having to come together as a team and quickly making that transition to now I have to not necessarily think about myself, even though I'm being individually graded or evaluated, but the success of the team is also my success.
Yeah, so the big thing there is your level of physical preparedness going into an event like that is going to be the number one thing that allows you to separate yourself. So it's like you said, you know, if you are focused on the task at hand and you know you have an objective that you want to get to, it's physical preparedness is one thing, but having the mental drive and the mental toughness and kind of having that mantra to like know like you want something so bad that you're willing to push yourself to get there. Well, then it's like, you know, the whole David Goggins thing, like mental callousing. Like, I don't care what you physically put me through. Like, mentally, I'm willing to go there. I'm going to keep going there. And so in training, you just have to put yourself in uncomfortable positions all the time. And then before you know it, you're used to being there. You've so focused inwards on how much you're hurting, but now you can look around and start lifting up the guys around you. But, you know, step one is you have to want it, and then you have to physically prepare yourself to be there. Because, you know, if the grind of being, you know, in a 3-week event like that has broken you down to the point that that you can't keep going because you're not physically ready, well, that's just a failure of preparation. But yeah, a lot of different points that go into it. But
you know, you do CrossFit for 2 or 3 months, you might not see the numbers change on the scale, you might not feel like, but if you can show people with data, like you're actually improving, you just hit a PR, you're getting better.
Gym owners were able to just basically click a button and get all the resources and tools that we were using for our gyms at, you know, at a fraction of what it would cost them.
Like if gyms provide a better product on the floor by having better coaches, their business is going to be healthier. They're gonna have better retention and have all those other features, and coaching is a skill that needs to be developed. We are, I would argue, the most product-focused company in our space, and the way we create value is by we build products. In 2012, we told gyms to put TVs on their walls, and we got laughed at. And go in any CrossFit gym in the world now, and you're probably gonna see a TV on the wall. But we're just constantly pushing the envelope with innovation.
The other grueling, well, we're here at one of the most, on day one, the most grueling fitness and sports competitions in the world. You've been in the CrossFit semifinals 2 times.
Correct.
Talk about that experience and talk about that preparation. When you and I spoke, I said, what's your vision? What's your goal? And you said, well, I got to get back to the games. And you hear that from so many people who are in CrossFit. But talk about your training and also about the change in your life that CrossFit has brought you when you think about your own body composition and when you look at yourself.
Yeah, so you know, when I started grad school, I moved from California to New Jersey, and I had been into Olympic weightlifting, and I wanted to continue that in New Jersey. I didn't know where else to go besides
Sorry
the CrossFit
that you
gym.
lived in New Jersey, by the way.
It wasn't that bad.
Yes.
I didn't know where else to go besides the CrossFit gym, and previously I had been somebody that was like, oh, CrossFit's so dumb, I'm never doing that. And, you know, here I am at the CrossFit Games. But I didn't know where else to do Olympic weightlifting besides a CrossFit gym. So I started at a CrossFit gym. Because of my gymnastics background, I ended up picking up a lot of the CrossFit movements easier than most. And I ended up progressing pretty quickly in CrossFit. And initially it was just, you know, recreational. I moved to New Jersey. I was about 40 to 50 pounds overweight. Like I said, lots of Taco Bell. But when I started in a CrossFit gym, I also got introduced to some I got introduced to the nutritional side of things. I started working with a nutrition coach, started learning about, healthy food choices, things like that. And I ended up losing about 40 or 50 pounds throughout my first couple years in CrossFit, and completely changed my life. I was in a very unhealthy, physically and mentally, place before I started CrossFit, and it allowed me to understand my physical capabilities, but also my mental capabilities. You're talking about if you can endure the physical pain, you can train your mind to endure the mental pain and to be comfortable in that pain. And so a lot of it was kind of growing on the mental side of things for me there. So I had started a PhD program in New Jersey. About 2.5 years in, I realized that I was very unhappy. It just wasn't the career path that I wanted to take with my life, so I ended up leaving my program with a master's degree. And then...
Still a huge achievement.
Yeah, absolutely.
I ended up deployed for a year, came back, COVID happened, got activated by the New Jersey National Guard for COVID for about 14 months. And then after I had kind of done what I felt had really fulfilled me in terms of what I wanted to give to our country serving in the military, I decided that I wanted to start looking at CrossFit as something that I seriously wanted to pursue in terms of competing. So I ended up moving from New Jersey to Kansas. I live in Kansas City, Kansas now, and I train full time. So I've gone from absolutely hating CrossFit to joining a gym, taking, an hour class a day, to now I'm in the gym 6 to 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, training to try and compete at the CrossFit Games.
And you have competed.
Well, I have not made it to the games yet. I qualified for semifinals twice.
Okay.
So in order to make it to the games, you start with the CrossFit Open, which is a worldwide online competition. If you finish within the top 10% of your region in the Open, you qualify for quarterfinals. If you finish quarterfinals in a qualifying spot, it varies by region, then you qualify for semifinals. So this year I needed to finish quarterfinals top 60 in the North America West region to qualify for semifinals. I qualified for the North America West semifinal, and then out of those 60 females at the semifinal, the top 10 qualified for the CrossFit Games. So I finished 20th this year, missed it by a little bit, but huge improvements from last year at semifinals. Last year, the structure was a little bit different, but I had finished 22nd out of 28, I think, last year. So to go from 22nd out of 28 to 20 out of 60 was massive improvement.
I mean, 20th place is really impressive. That's,
I mean, that's elite
absolutely.
level
That's
athlete. Can you talk a little bit about, I heard you speak before about sort of the intimidation factor of going into the CrossFit gym for the first time, and where your confidence level was there, and how you were able to rise up to those challenges and have such a huge transformation.
Yeah, so being very overweight, I had a lot of issues with self-confidence. I was very unhappy. I wasn't happy in my body, and because of that, I was just in a very bad place mentally. Going to the CrossFit gym for the first time, it was scary, but one of the coolest things about CrossFit is that the community is so welcoming of anybody and everybody, and it's very much, hey, you're here to improve yourself, and we commend you for that, and we want to help you improve yourself. Yeah. And like, if you're willing to put in the work, I don't care what you look like, what you... It doesn't matter. You're here to put in the work. That's what matters.
Yeah.
And so over time, it initially started with me being able to change my physical appearance. And at the time, I tied a lot of my worth to my physical appearance. And being able to change that allowed me at least to become more confident in myself. And through that confidence, I learned to be confident in my body for what it's capable of instead of what it looks like. And so it was an interesting journey from a very superficial reasoning into a much deeper reasoning of being appreciative and confident in my body, and developing kind of that mental resilience to understand, hey, it doesn't matter what I look like, it matters the effort that I put in and what I'm capable of doing.
Yes.
I feel like just about everybody that does CrossFit goes through that phase, especially the ones that want to be competitive, because at first you're kind of like, man, I really just want to look good, because that matters to just about everyone. And then you realize that when you carry such a low, when you underfeed yourself or you're too low body fat, you can't perform the way that you need to. And I feel like it takes a long time, like a big self journey to kind of realize that.
Yeah, and I mean, I've gone through all of that. When I first started trying to compete, I was essentially starving myself. I was eating 1,600 to 1,800 calories a day. For perspective, right now I eat about 3,500 calories a day. But it was just this.
Feel a lot better, probably.
Oh, absolutely. But in my mind, I was like, well, if I want to stay small, I can't eat.
Right, strength to weight ratio.
Yeah, exactly. And going from being so big to losing the weight, I was terrified of putting the weight back on.
Yeah.
So it's been a journey for sure.
And was that an intentional effort in your brain to make that shift from like aesthetic focus to achievement and performance focus, or is it something that almost fell into place just by being in competition?
I think it's kind of naturally fallen into place because I do still struggle with, physical appearance, and sometimes I find myself putting weight into that, and I have to catch myself and say, hey, like, it's okay that you can't see your full six-pack right now because you are not in a cutting phase right now. You are in a strength building phase, and you're going to get a little bit bigger for the bigger goal and the bigger picture. And so I still do struggle with it, but it's becoming much easier to notice when I'm having those moments and remind myself that that's not the important part.
Right.
Anecdotally, I PR'd my snatch after having about 5 chocolate chip cookies. So if there's any correlation and causation there
you go.
then we can extrapolate.
I also haven't seen my six-pack in quite a while. So unless it was in my fridge, I haven't caught a glimpse of that thing in quite a bit. You both have brought up a point about closing the gap of being good to being great, and being at the elite level. We had the chance yesterday to speak with Roman Krenikov. So finished second last year in the games, favored this year to be towards the top. So we're rooting for him because we had him on. So we want to see it for sure. But the question that we posed to him was, if you're going to go from 50 to 30 and 30 to 10, it's going to take hard work. Let's not get it wrong. But the spread from 50 to 10 in talent is usually larger than this. Well, let me quantify that. It's larger than the spread from 1 to 10, right? The level of competition is much tighter. The margin of error is much smaller. So in order now to go from 10 to 1, 5 to 1, 2 to 1, 20 to, right, 20 to 10 is going to take what I call the 2%, the 1% difference. As you look now to next year, and you walk around here this year. So number one, I want to ask you, how do you talk about your emotions here, being here in this year, with the vision of next year, and how are you now going to think about your training to close that gap that is inevitably going to be tougher to close than it was to go from 50 or 100 to 20?
Yeah. So being here, I mean, it's obviously disappointing that I don't get to be on the competition field this year. I have some friends competing, seeing them doing all their check-in photos, getting their gear, now seeing them on the floor. I wish I could be out there with them. And it's disappointing that I can't be on the field, but I also just love this event, this sport, this community. I love it so much, and one of my favorite things every year is coming to the CrossFit Games. This is my 3rd year at the CrossFit Games, and it makes me so excited to get back to training, because now all I'm thinking about is getting out on that field next year. And, talking about closing the gap from 20 to 10 to make the cut next year, it does get much harder to close that gap when you get closer to the top. And I think one of the biggest things that I took away from my semifinals experience this year, and also that I am gaining being at the games this year, is developing more confidence in myself as an elite athlete, and truly believing that I am physically and mentally capable of qualifying for the games. Coming out of semifinals and looking back on my performances, I felt very confident that I was fit enough to qualify. I just had some execution errors that I need to clean up, whether it's through just more experience or, better planning and foresight going into the workouts. But I felt like it wasn't my fitness that held me back this year. Last year, I was very much held back by my fitness. I just was not fit enough to make it to the games last year. But this year, I felt like a much different athlete. And so coming out of semifinals and reflecting on that, it's really been motivating to feel like I truly have the capability to make it out there next year. And then on top of that, being here at the games and meeting complete strangers who are coming up to me saying, "Oh my gosh, I watched you at semifinals. You're amazing. I know you're going to make it next year." And hearing that from somebody who doesn't know me, has never met me, has no reason to believe in me, and is believing in me, it makes me think, okay, this is real. Like, I can do this. And if I just continue to put my head down and work, I'm going to make it.
Yeah. Something I love so much about your story is how once you set your mind to do something and to become good, like with the nutrition and your coaching, you just went out and you searched. And didn't you send emails to a ton of different people and just moved to find the best coaching?
Yeah, so after the 2021 season, I had finished quarterfinals about 100 spots out from qualifying for semifinals, and I felt confident that I had the ability to make semifinals. I just didn't necessarily know how.
Right.
Like, I knew that I could make the jump, but I didn't know how exactly to make that jump. So I decided to start reaching out to different training camps. I sent emails to a lot of different training camps throughout the states that currently have populations of successful games athletes, and it was just, hey, I'm trying to do this thing. At the time I was 29, and Masters in CrossFit starts at 35, so I'm
sweet.
I'm trying to make it as an individual before I get quote unquote too old, which is a whole nother topic.
Yeah,
which
35 is not too old.
Yeah. But I didn't want to miss my window.
Yeah.
And I felt like I was approaching that, like, hey, if you don't do it now, it might be too late.
Mm-hmm.
So I had been reaching out, seeing if anybody was, interested in taking on new athletes. And I ended up getting connected with Jill Glassnap in Kansas City. And at the time, she was coaching a couple games athletes. And I got on a call with her. We talked for a little bit. She invited me out to train for the weekend. And I really enjoyed it. And she said, if you want to come out here, you're more than welcome. We'd love to have you. So I went back to New Jersey, figured out some logistical stuff, and a couple months later I was packing my stuff up in a U-Haul and driving to Kansas.
How is it that your role in the Army allowed you to have so much flexibility and move like that?
So I was in the National Guard at the time, and I had done an interstate transfer from the California National Guard to the New Jersey National Guard. I like I said, I had been activated by the New Jersey National Guard for the COVID response in New Jersey, and I spent 14 months on active duty orders for that COVID response in New Jersey. I had just come off those active duty orders. So I was no longer working full time for the Army. I was back to being a regularly drilling guardsman, which meant my obligation was to go to drill 1 weekend a month and then annual training a couple weeks over the summer.
Cool.
So I had tried to do an interstate transfer from New Jersey to Kansas when I moved. Bureaucratic paperwork takes forever. Things got lost. It didn't end up working out. After about a year and a half of trying to make that happen, I decided that I had gotten what I wanted out of the Army, and I felt like I had given the Army all I could. So I felt like it was time for me to move on, and I ended up submitting my resignation packet.
Gotcha.
Joe, you're earlier in a lot of respects in your CrossFit journey now, but as you look forward, so let's quantify it in that you're serving active duty now. In one of our, well, I'll be biased, our nation's most elite unit, and how do you got to balance it? You got to balance your time on the Warrior Fitness team, where you were afforded the opportunity to train and to compete, with being a full-time active duty service member.
Yeah, and that is tough. But one of the good things about being in the military in general is that it is necessary to be in good shape, and then obviously with CrossFit it is extremely necessary to be in phenomenal shape. So at that point it becomes down to like priorities. There's gonna be times where I'm going TDY, and maybe like at that point the priority is the job, because I'm out doing that training. But at that point you have to make a decision. Hey, am I gonna sacrifice an hour of sleep so I can get something in, or am I gonna get the extra sleep and just focus on my job that day? And so sometimes it's just coming up with that balance, and then maximizing your opportunities when you do have time to train, to do that. So it's always just a balancing act. But I think in the Army we're kind of used to having to find that balance, so yeah. Did you have the same experience back when you were
Yeah, it was definitely the time that I spent on active orders, both during my deployment and during my COVID activation. It was very much like, hey, sometimes the Army is going to be the priority and my training is going to suffer because of it. But when I have the opportunity to make training my priority, I can do that, and I can, focus on that training, knowing that it's going to swing the other way pretty soon, and I'm going to need to start focusing on the job again.
Yeah, for sure. And we get time to work out in the mornings usually, especially if we're not out doing training actively. So, maximize that time all the time, and then sleep. Maximizing sleep whenever you can, because the Army is notoriously bad about it. So sometimes you have to take a personal stand, like, no, I'm going to sleep.
Teaches you to be able to go to sleep anywhere.
Yeah.
Hey, the new
So,
regulation
that's the
approves tactical napping, right?
There you go.
Nice.
Oh man.
What are you doing with neuroscience these days?
So I'm actually not in science anymore.
Oh, okay.
I had started the PhD program, and I was very interested in the science, and I still am very interested in neuroscience, but I didn't like the practical application of it in scientific research. I struggled a lot with feeling like what we were doing was too narrow, and we didn't understand what we were doing well enough to actually be able to apply it to a bigger picture. Like, how can I actually affect people's lives and improve or promote positive change in the world?
Mm-hmm.
When I was in grad school, I was studying the dopamine system and reward learning, and we were trying to figure out what dopamine neurons encode during a reward learning task where you perform an action and receive a reward. And it was a super interesting concept to me, but it was so specific to the specific type of mouse that I was performing my experiments on, and everything had to be so controlled, which it's science. You have to control things, because if you look at too many variables, you don't know what's going on. But we would run into things where, like, hey, we can't replicate the results that this other lab got in this experiment because our mice are handled by men and their mice were handled by women, and it changes the results of the experiment. And so I just felt like what I was doing, like, I could tell you all about a dopamine neuron in a mouse, but what does that matter for? Like, what am I doing to improve the world? And so I still enjoy science, and I still enjoy, reading about things, and I like reading research papers. I like, kind of like the pop science that people are doing nowadays. But I just couldn't spend my life devoted to something that I didn't feel was the level of productivity that I wanted it to be.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. Have you noticed, one of my favorite themes, like, looking back in life, is seeing how I had, like, one specific goal that was so important, and then it ended up not being the way. And when that ends, it kind of feels like, what was I doing? Why did I waste so much time on this thing? And then later in life, you're like, oh my gosh, all those things I learned suddenly came back in this unexpected way. Are there any cool things you learned in your science path that now you're able to use in unique ways?
Oh, I haven't thought about that. I'm sure there are things.
Yeah.
And and looking at something and realizing, hey, like, what I thought was my goal is no longer my goal, and did I just waste a bunch of time? I always try to look at things as, like, I've gone through a lot of different career options in my life, I guess, if that's the right term for it.
Sorry, me too.
Same.
I'm still trying to figure out what I want to be when I grow up.
I hope I never do.
But I do see all of the things that I have moved on from, not as wasting my time, but as I have learned amazing things from all of them, and I have learned what doesn't make me happy, which I think is just as important as learning what makes me happy. Because if I know that something doesn't make me happy, and I see something in my future where I say, hey, I think I want to do that, but then I start to notice parallels from something previously, that's going to be a red flag to me to say, hey, maybe this isn't what I want to do. So I think it's important to learn what you don't like just as much as learning what you do like.
Yeah.
And so I think in a broader context, things have come back to help me along my path in the future. I'm sure if I thought on it, I could think of some specifics, but nothing immediately comes to mind.
Yeah, let us know tomorrow.
Yeah.
We'll come back to that.
Can we ask about Rise Athletes?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Rise Foundation is a nonprofit that I started with my friend Jeff Pilon. Rise stands for Resiliency, Identity, Strength, and Empowerment. And we are a women-centric organization focused on empowering women, providing a space and resources for females to learn and grow in and out of fitness. We support a couple athletes. We also, we had a little girl here yesterday. Her name's Evelyn, and she is an individual that we're currently supporting. She was diagnosed with Turner syndrome, I think maybe 6 months to a year ago. And she's young. I think she's like 6 or 7 years old. And this is something that she's going to live with for the rest of her life. But with everything.
What does that do?
So I don't know all the details on it, but it's, I believe it's a female-specific disease disorder. I don't know the right terminology for it. But basically when she was diagnosed, the first thing the doctors wanted to do was remove her ovaries at 6 years old.
Oh my gosh.
And so her dad is very close with Jeff, who started the foundation with me. And her dad was really struggling with, I have a young daughter who the doctors are saying the best course of action is to take out her ovaries, and what do I do? Like, this is literally going to be a decision that would impact the rest of her life. She would never be able to have the opportunity to bear children. Is that a decision that I am, as a father, I'm even allowed to make? And so it was a very challenging time. I think they have shifted to some new experimental treatments that don't yet require that course of action. But she's one of the females that we support. We cover her gymnastics classes and we cover her CrossFit Kids classes, because our goal is to use fitness as a way to help females learn, grow, develop that resiliency. So that's one of our big missions right now. We also we just finished up our beta program of a new program that we're launching called Rise Conversations. Originally, we had started with the Rise podcast, which I was hosting and bringing on guests, interviewing them about how they have developed their resiliency, identity, strength, and empowerment through various things within their lives.
It's fun, right?
It was really fun, but we wanted something more interactive. And so we shifted to a format where instead of just recording a podcast and releasing it for people to listen to, we're now doing a weekly Zoom call. It's a small group, open to females who are interested in being part of this group. And we talk about different topics every week. We bring on guests who are subject matter experts in various topics, mental wellness, women's health, fitness, whatever it may be. And a lot of it is the individuals who are part of it, what they want to hear about. So if they have a specific topic that they want to talk about or hear about, we'll try to find somebody who can come in and provide that for them. And so instead of just listening to somebody talk, it's an actual interactive experience where they get to ask questions. They get to guide the conversation in the way that's going to be the most valuable for them.
That's really cool.
Yeah,
That
it's
sounds
been
like
a lot
fun.
of fun.
Yeah. And you do that weekly, you said?
Yes, so we just finished up our beta program, which we were doing calls weekly. We're taking a little bit of a break right now. Most of us are at the CrossFit Games right now, and it's been insanely hectic here. After after the games, hopefully within the next couple weeks, we'll be launching the official program, and that'll be a weekly call.
Wow.
Yeah.
You ready for the test question?
Oh boy, bring it.
It's a test question. The Jedburghs in World War II had to do 3 things to be successful every day as core foundational tasks, and call them habits, if you want. They had to be able to shoot, they had to be able to move, and they had to be able to communicate. You guys probably each have heard about that and have experienced that in depth. But that, if you do those things, and you do these core foundational tasks with precision every day, and that becomes your habit, then you can actually focus your attention on more challenging and complex things that come your way, because you don't have to worry about the routine. What are the 3 things that you each do in your world to be successful every day? Told you it was a test question.
That's a good one.
You want to go first?
Are you ready? Do you have something?
I can go.
Okay, yeah, send it.
All right, so one thing I do every day, I plan what I'm going to eat the next day. I obviously follow a fairly strict nutritional regimen, and I find that if I plan my food the day before, it's one less decision I have to, actually a lot less decisions I have to make the next day.
I would benefit from that.
And it also means that I'm going to hit my numbers every day because
Yeah.
I know exactly what I'm eating.
Yeah, you're not going to make the poor decision in the moment.
Yeah.
I'm
And
noting that one.
I will say part of that involves making sure that I have enough macros to have M&Ms with dinner every night. Because if I know I'm having M&Ms with dinner, I have a lot easier time saying no to the temptations that come up throughout the day.
I love that.
Because I know the
That's good.
M&Ms are coming. So I plan my food for the next day. A second thing I do every day is I always do my dishes.
Ooh.
Ooh.
Yes.
That's
I
good.
hate
I'm
going
stealing
to
that
bed with dishes in the sink. It stresses me out
Yep.
because I like to be able to wake up the next morning and just go.
I think it says something about somebody who lets their dishes pile up over the course of a week.
Yeah.
How can you survive in those conditions?
Oh my God, it stresses me out so bad.
I have anxiety. I have anxiety all day long. I'll come in. I find that some days I'll look back on the day and say, I was unproductive today because all I did was clean dishes for everybody in this house. Jason Khalipa, former CrossFit champ, who we're going to have on tomorrow, talked about this in my last conversation with him when he was on the podcast last year, and he talked about this. It's a clean sink syndrome.
Yeah.
And
do it.
and it is something that they have tied. There's a whole thing. You could probably Google it or whatever, and they have tied that to elite performers as CEOs, as athletes, all over. That there's this group of people who have demonstrated success, and when they walk into a dirty kitchen, they will cease everything they're doing and clean the kitchen.
That is so funny.
And they don't
I've never
go to
heard
bed
of that.
without
Yeah.
doing it.
Yeah. I hate it. And there will be some days where it just doesn't happen,
Yeah.
but it stresses me out when
Oh, yeah.
those days come.
And there's like a whole
yeah.
nother level of these people who will they'll cook and have to clean before
they eat.
Yeah. That's a whole nother
That's
level.
my wife.
But that's a great wife.
That's my wife. I'm gonna just like sit down. I'll wash the dishes after.
Oh my
You
gosh.
know I will. Sit down. You cooked. Come on.
And then the third thing I do, I want to do it every day. I don't always do it every day, but what I try to do every day is call my parents. I'm very family oriented, and my parents live in California. For the past 12 years, I have not lived in California. I've lived in New Jersey and now Kansas. And so I call my parents every day just to know that they're okay, to tell them I love them, and just to have that little bit of connection to my family.
Love it.
Plan your meals for the day, do the dishes, and call your parents to create the connection. Love
Yeah.
it.
All right. I've had time to let marinate a little bit.
You don't get to use any of those. She took them off the table.
All right. The dishes one. That's okay. Fine. I have a little more time
No,
to
you
marinate.
can't. If you
Yeah,
go
yeah,
and
yeah.
say what, you can use.
No, so dishes, that's key, as we've elaborated. But so life has ebbs and flows. Some days, with work, you're busier. You don't have that much time during the day to do things to work on you. Other times, you maybe have a little more free time. But regardless, there's a few things that I've realized that I always do. One is at some point during the day, I'm doing something that's kind of self-development, and that could be reading, even if I just get one page in, at least I made progress, or using my commute to work for an audiobook or a podcast or something that's not just not just pure entertainment, but something that moves you forward a little bit, moves the needle.
Not 4 scrolls of Instagram.
Yeah, that happens.
4 swipes up of Instagram.
Exactly, even if they're educational swipes, you're still swiping. No, so something, and I mean that can be working out too. If all you did was get even a 20-minute workout, you did something to get better that day. So no matter how busy I am, I try to do something that's towards self-development. The other thing is, again, no matter how busy I am, or even if I had all the free time in the world, I try to abide by a healthy sleep routine. And I've noticed that doing so has made a huge difference in sleep quality, which obviously plays massive dividends in everything you do on a daily basis. So I personally, I do read before bed. My wife helps with that too, because she's always the one that gets in bed first. I'm like, well, if she's there, I might as well go too. Reading helps wind down. Obviously, doing things like brushing your teeth, but then doing it all in the same order just kind of helps remind the body, hey, it's time to go to bed. Helps fall asleep faster typically, and then trying to do that at around the same time every night. I think that's made a huge difference. And
You sound like you've spent a lot of time with Major Brager.
No, but Dr. Matthew Walker spent a lot of time with the audiobook, so while we sleep. If you haven't read that book, phenomenal book, audiobook or something. Yeah. But and then of course you can't go to bed if you have dirty dishes. So that's number 3.
I like it. Take time for self-development, have a healthy sleep routine, and do the dishes.
of course.
It's gonna go into the title of this episode. So.
Okay.
Forging elite performance and doing the dishes. Well,
Sounds good.
the day's about to close out. The adaptive and the age athletes are about to, if they haven't already, started the finals here. That's going to close out their competition. Their award ceremony will be tonight. Over the course of the next couple of days, we're going to ramp it up big time for the individuals and the teams. We're looking forward to it. Wish you guys the best of luck. So we know, Ellia, for you, that next year is going to be dedicated to that training. We'll be watching your journey.
Thank you.
We look forward to checking in with you over the next
Absolutely.
year on that. And
Hey, I heard that if I come on this podcast, it means I'm going to qualify for the games next year. So
I will tell you that if you do, you won't be the first. You will. I think we have a pretty good success rate. So absolutely.
Good
So
sign.
you're there.
Nice.
So and Joe, continue to serve our nation and make us proud. We can't do anything in this world, in this country, without people who stand up and answer the call. It is about be all you can be. We need them out there. We need them to serve their country, stand up, do what's right day in and day out, and continue to make sure that our nation is the greatest nation in the world. So thank you for your service. Thanks for carrying the torch. My days are behind me. You're the new generation, and we look up to you for what you're doing right now.
Thank
So
you, and thank you for your service, of course, and doing everything here, in this podcast, getting the word out. So, thanks.
thanks so much for having us. This was a lot of fun.
All right, now we can get out of the sauna.
All right.
Right.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thanks.
American Jedburghs went out to form the foundation of the United States Special Forces and the Special Activities Directorate of the Central Intelligence Agency. Thanks for listening to the Jedburgh Podcast. I'm your creator and host, Fran Racioppi. Join us next week for a new episode on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Check us out on YouTube for full episodes, highlights, and other behind-the-scenes content. If you like what you heard, give us a like and leave a review. Follow me, Fran Racioppi, Jessie, Graff, Talent War Group, and our CrossFit Games sponsors, US Army, Wodify, GoRuck, and Hero Coffee on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, Threads, or X. Send your comments and inquiries to fran@jedburghpodcast.com. As a former member of Special Forces, the Jedburgh Podcast donates a percentage of all proceeds to the Green Beret Foundation, supporting America's Special Forces and their families. Thanks for joining us on this episode. How you prepare today determines success tomorrow.